The Titanic, the grand ocean liner famously known as unsinkable, tragically sank on its maiden voyage on April 15, 1912. It struck an iceberg in the icy waters of the North Atlantic, taking the lives of over 1,500 passengers and crew members. The sinking of the Titanic remains one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history, but what makes it even more intriguing is the lore surrounding it, specifically, the ghost stories tied to the ill-fated ship. The Titanic's tragic demise became a focal point for numerous myths and legends, many of which involve the supernatural. Ghostly apparitions, mysterious sounds, and unexplainable events have been reported both by those who survived and by those who visited the wreck site in later years. These accounts suggest that the ship's haunting is not merely a tale of ghosts but also a reflection of the profound grief and trauma that surrounded the sinking. Perhaps the most chilling ghost stories involve sightings of passengers who perished in the disaster. Several individuals who claim to have visited the site of the wreck reported seeing apparitions of the Titanic's passengers on the deck. Some said they had seen figures in period clothing, standing by the railings as if they were waiting for rescue. Others reported hearing ghostly voices, faint cries for help or murmurs of final words spoken by those who had drowned in the icy waters. One such haunting comes from a woman named Mary Sloan, who, in the 1930s, visited the Titanic's wreck site on an expedition. She claimed that during the dive to the wreck, she saw the figure of a woman in a long white dress standing near the ship's railing. The apparition vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Sloan with a profound sense of unease. There are also reports of cold spots and strange noises around the wreckage. Some divers who explored the ship's remains described sudden drops in temperature, as if the water surrounding them had turned frigid for no apparent reason. Others mentioned hearing faint knocks and creaks echoing through the wreckage, reminiscent of a ship still alive, still sailing. But the Titanic's ghostly tales do not stop there. Some stories claim that the spirits of those who died in the disaster still roam the waters, seeking solace for their untimely deaths. One tale speaks of the ghostly figure of a man in a tuxedo, pacing the ship's deck as if reliving the moments before the sinking. Another story involves a crew member who vanished without a trace after he supposedly made a pact with a mysterious entity just before the ship's departure. For those who have visited the site of the Titanic's wreckage, the eerie atmosphere and the sense that something inexplicable lingers in the waters are undeniable. It's as though the tragedy that struck that fateful night has left an indelible mark on the site, with the spirits of the lost souls unwilling to move on. As with many paranormal stories, the line between superstition and reality is often blurred. Could the Titanic's hauntings be the result of collective grief, amplified by the unimaginable tragedy of the disaster? Or are the spirits of the Titanic's passengers truly reaching out from beyond the grave, still trapped in the moments before they met their untimely end? The answer, like the mystery of the Titanic itself, remains unclear. But the stories, the ghostly sightings, and the eerie phenomena that continue to surround the ship have kept the legend alive. They remind us that sometimes, tragedy transcends time, and the spirits of the past can linger long after the events themselves have passed. The Tower of London, one of the most iconic and haunting landmarks in England, has stood for nearly 1,000 years as a symbol of royal power and a grim witness to the tumultuous history of the British monarchy. It has served as a royal palace, a prison, a fortress, and a place of execution. Over the centuries, it has become notorious not just for its dark past, but for the numerous ghost stories that have become intertwined with its legacy. The tower is perhaps best known for its association with royal figures, particularly those who met tragic ends within its walls. Among the most famous of these is Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. Anne, who was executed by beheading in 1536, is said to haunt the tower's grounds to this day. She has been spotted near the spot of her execution, her spectral figure often seen wearing a white gown and carrying her severed head under one arm. The story of Anne's ghost has been passed down for centuries, with several accounts from individuals who claim to have seen her appear suddenly in the tower's eerie corridors or walking the grounds at dusk. Her haunting has been described as a chilling reminder of her tragic fate and the brutal politics of the Tudor dynasty. Another prominent ghostly figure that is said to haunt the tower is Lady Jane Grey, the nine-day queen who was executed by beheading in 1554. Jane was just 16 years old when she was executed on the orders of Queen Mary I, following her brief reign. Many visitors and staff at the tower have reported seeing a ghostly figure that is believed to be Jane, wandering the tower's courtyard in a daze, her face a mask of sorrow and regret. One account describes her as walking silently, her ghostly presence almost ethereal as she fades into the mist of the tower's medieval walls. While royal ghosts are perhaps the most famous, the tower is also home to many other spirits, particularly those of prisoners who met untimely deaths or endured unspeakable suffering within its walls. Over the centuries, the tower served as a place of torture for those deemed enemies of the crown, and the ghosts of these unfortunate souls are believed to still haunt the tower today. One such spirit is that of the princes in the tower, Edward V and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York. The two boys were imprisoned in the tower in 1483, possibly on the orders of their uncle, Richard III. The boys were never seen again, and their mysterious disappearance has been the subject of speculation for centuries. Many believe that they were murdered within the tower, and their spirits are said to wander the grounds, eternally seeking justice. Others have reported hearing the sounds of anguished cries and chains dragging across the floors late at night, particularly in the area near the tower's Bloody Tower, which was once used as a royal residence but became notorious for its association with these tragic figures. The sounds of footsteps echoing in empty halls, the flickering of candlelight in abandoned rooms, and the sensation of being watched are common experiences reported by those who have spent time in the tower. One particularly haunting tale involves the apparition of a mysterious figure known only as the White Lady. It is said that this ghost, dressed in a long flowing gown, appears on occasion within the tower's inner precincts. Some believe that the White Lady is the spirit of a woman who was imprisoned and executed by the monarchy centuries ago, while others think she may be a royal maid or servant who met a tragic end during the tower's darkest days. The tower's long history and its association with death, betrayal, and power have made it a magnet for the supernatural. Visitors and staff have reported seeing shadowy figures, feeling sudden drops in temperature, or sensing an oppressive presence as they walk through the tower's labyrinthine corridors. The pervasive feeling of being watched, combined with the tower's deep-rooted connection to death and violence, makes it one of the most haunted places in the world. As the sun sets over the Thames, casting long shadows across the tower's walls, the spirits of those who perished within its gates seem to stir. The tower is not just a monument to British history, it is a silent witness to the sorrow, betrayal, and fear that have shaped the monarchy and the nation. The ghosts of the tower remind us that history is never truly gone, it lingers, haunting us, echoing through time. The Amityville horror is one of the most infamous and controversial paranormal cases in modern history. The story began in December 1975, when the Lutz family moved into a beautiful Dutch colonial-style house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The house, however, had a dark history. Just 1 year prior, the DeFeo family had been brutally murdered by their son, Ronald DeFeo Jr. The house's reputation for tragedy would soon take on a new life of its own, as the Lutz family would experience terrifying events that would change their lives forever. The Lutz family consisted of George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children. They were initially thrilled with their new home, which was spacious and affordable. However, shortly after moving in, they began to experience strange phenomena. It started with minor disturbances, foul smells, cold drafts, and mysterious noises. But soon, these occurrences escalated into more sinister events. The Lutzes reported hearing loud, unexplained banging sounds in the walls, furniture moving on its own, and the temperature in the house fluctuating dramatically, especially in the basement. One of the most terrifying incidents involved the appearance of a ghostly figure in the house. The Lutz family claimed to have seen a large, demonic figure with glowing red eyes. The figure would appear suddenly and would often be seen by different members of the family at the same time, as though it was intentionally tormenting them. The entity seemed to have a particular hold over George Lutz, who began to experience violent mood swings and bizarre behavior. He reportedly became obsessed with the house's demonic presence, and his health began to deteriorate rapidly. Perhaps the most chilling event took place in the middle of the night when the family reported hearing the voices of children calling their names from the walls. The Lutzes also claimed to have seen their daughter, Missy, speaking to an invisible entity that she called Jody, a demonic presence that seemed to communicate with her. Over time, the atmosphere in the house grew darker, and the Lutz family became increasingly terrified. Despite their fear, the family tried to endure the haunting. However, the supernatural events only became more intense. Kathy Lutz, the mother, experienced a powerful vision of the house's bloody past. She saw the image of the DeFeo family being murdered. This vision was so vivid that it left her physically and emotionally shaken. The family's once peaceful life had been completely upended, and the terror they faced within the house seemed insurmountable. The Lutz family eventually fled the house, abandoning all their possessions in a panic. They sought help from paranormal investigators and spiritual leaders, but the haunting continued to haunt them in other ways. The events were later documented by authors Jay Anson in the 1977 book The Amityville Horror, which became a bestseller and was adapted into a movie, further perpetuating the legend of the house. The Amityville Horror became one of the most talked-about paranormal events of the 20th century. Skeptics argue that the Lutz family fabricated the story for financial gain, pointing to inconsistencies in their accounts and the sensationalized nature of the media coverage. However, those who believe in the supernatural argue that the Lutz family's experiences were genuine, and that the house was truly cursed by the malevolent spirits of the DeFeo family. To this day, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue remains a source of fascination and debate. The Amityville Horror is more than just a haunting story. It's a symbol of the lingering presence of evil in places where violence and death have occurred. The house, and the tragedy it represents, remains one of the most infamous in American paranormal lore. The Bell Witch haunting, one of the most notorious paranormal cases in American history, began in the early 19th century in Adams, Tennessee. The Bell family, led by John Bell, moved into a small farm in the area, unaware that they were about to become the subjects of one of the most bizarre and terrifying supernatural occurrences in the country's history. The haunting began in 1817, when John Bell and his family started noticing strange sounds around their home. At first, it was just a soft scratching noise, but it quickly escalated into loud banging and tapping. The family would hear footsteps walking around their home, even though no one was there. The disturbances became more frightening when the family began to witness ghostly figures in their home, and their pet dog became increasingly agitated and would often run away. As the haunting intensified, the family began to hear a disembodied voice. The voice, which initially started as a whisper, soon grew louder and clearer. It identified itself as the Bell Witch, a supernatural entity that claimed to be the spirit of a woman who had died in the area years before. The Bell Witch's voice would taunt and curse the family, particularly John Bell. It was said that the spirit would berate him, call him names, and even threaten to kill him. The Bell Witch's power seemed to grow stronger each day, and it began physically attacking the family. The family reported being slapped, scratched, and pinched by unseen hands. John Bell, in particular, seemed to suffer the most. He grew weak and ill, and the family believed that the Bell Witch was causing his decline. In one particularly strange incident, John Bell reportedly fell into a deep, trance-like state and appeared to be under the complete control of the entity. The haunting reached its peak in 1820 when John Bell died. The family believed that the Bell Witch had played a role in his death, and the death certificate listed his cause of death as unknown. The family, terrified by the events, abandoned their home, and the Bell Witch's haunting seemingly ended. But the story didn't die with them. The Bell Witch legend lived on, becoming a part of American folklore and terrifying those who heard it. Even today, people still visit Adams, Tennessee, in search of the Bell Witch's ghost. Some claim that the haunting continues, while others believe that the entire story is a work of fiction. Regardless of the truth, the Bell Witch haunting remains one of the most unsettling and famous cases of paranormal activity in American history. In the heart of Brussels, Belgium, there exists a house on Rue de la Ville-Draperie, a quiet street that may appear serene at first glance, but whose history is entwined with tragedy and the supernatural. This haunting tale revolves around a young woman named Isabel, whose peaceful existence was shattered when she moved into this seemingly idyllic home, unaware that it held a dark and disturbing presence. Isabel, a quiet and independent woman, moved into the house in the late 19th century. The property was charming, with old wooden beams, delicate lace curtains, and a view of the cobblestone street below. At first, everything seemed perfect, a place where Isabel could find solitude and peace away from the noise of the world. But soon, small, inexplicable events began to occur. The first strange occurrences were subtle. Isabel would often hear faint whispers in the hallways, voices too soft to decipher but enough to stir unease. At night, she could feel the cold air creeping beneath her blankets, despite the warmth of the hearth. She brushed it off, attributing it to her imagination or the drafts of an old house. However, things began to escalate when she started hearing footsteps in the corridor, approaching her room in the dead of night. The footsteps were deliberate, slow, as if someone, or something, was walking just outside her door, but when she opened it, no one was there. As the days passed, the phenomena grew more intense. The furniture in her home began to move on its own. Isabel would return home to find chairs pulled out from the table, books scattered across the floor, or her personal belongings shifted to different places. She would hear the sound of doors creaking open in the dead of night, only to find them securely locked when she checked. The house, it seemed, was alive with an invisible force, one that seemed intent on making its presence known. Isabel became increasingly unsettled. She sought advice from local priests, who performed multiple exorcisms, but nothing seemed to rid the house of its tormenting spirit. The more Isabel resisted, the more aggressive the haunting became. One evening, as she sat by the fire, she saw something that would forever change her perception of reality, a shadowy figure, tall and indistinct, standing in the corner of the room. It was cloaked in darkness, its features obscured, but its presence was undeniable. The figure did not move, did not speak, yet Isabel could feel its gaze upon her. The fear and dread that enveloped Isabel were overwhelming. The spirit, which she had come to believe was not merely a ghost but something darker, seemed to feed off her fear, growing stronger with every passing day. She would hear it calling her name in the middle of the night, soft whispers that would turn into violent screams, each one more horrifying than the last. The spirit appeared to take a particular interest in Isabel, tormenting her with visions of shadowy figures standing at her window and eerie noises that echoed through the house at all hours. One night, Isabel's fear reached its breaking point. She awoke to find the figure standing at the foot of her bed, towering over her with an oppressive energy that seemed to suck the air from the room. She could feel the cold breath on her neck, the weight of its gaze pressing down on her chest. In that moment, she knew she had to leave the house, but it was too late. The spirit had claimed its hold on her. The following morning, Isabel fled the house, never to return. Her once peaceful home had become a prison, and the terror she had endured within its walls haunted her for the rest of her life. Locals speak in hushed tones about the house on Rue de la Vieille-Draperie, claiming that the spirit of Isabel still roams the streets at night, her figure cloaked in sorrow and fear. Others claim to have heard her voice, crying out from the empty windows, calling for help, help that never came. Isabel's story remains one of the most chilling tales in Brussels history, a haunting reminder that some places are not just filled with bricks and mortar, but with something much darker. The house on Rue de la Vieille-Draperie stands as a testament to the terror that can dwell in the quietest of places, silent yet ever present, waiting for those who dare to enter. As we come to the end of this chapter, we must take a step back and reflect on the deeper implications of the hauntings we've encountered. Each story we've explored, the curse of the pharaohs, the ghosts of the Titanic, the spirits that linger in the Tower of London, the tragic spectres of Amityville, the Bell Witch's wrath, and the haunting house on Rue de la Vieille-Draperie, offers more than just tales of terror and mystery. They invite us to consider the nature of life, death, and the boundaries that separate them. The spirits and entities we encounter in these stories are not merely remnants of the past, but echoes, powerful, lingering manifestations of fear, sorrow, regret, and unresolved trauma. These lost souls, whether they are the ghosts of ancient kings, tragic victims of maritime disaster, or victims of violence and injustice, continue to haunt us because they have not found peace. They are trapped in an eternal limbo, unable to rest until their stories are told and their tragedies acknowledged. The haunting at the Tower of London, for example, is not just a collection of ghostly figures but a reflection of the brutal history of power and betrayal. The tortured souls of Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, and countless others speak not only to their personal suffering but to the oppressive nature of their society. The same can be said for the ghosts of the Titanic. Their tragic deaths represent the fragility of human existence and the brutal reminder of our vulnerability in the face of nature's uncontrollable forces. The spirits of the Bell Witch and the haunted house in Rue de la Ville-Draperie are equally symbolic. They represent the lingering trauma of violence and the unresolved emotions that often accompany it. In these stories, the supernatural is not an external force but an internal manifestation of the pain and suffering that refuses to be forgotten. The spirits of the past are not simply trapped in time, they are reflections of our own fears and the consequences of our actions. In many ways, the hauntings we have discussed mirror the fears that reside in all of us. Death is perhaps the greatest unknown, and the idea that something might linger after it, whether in the form of a restless spirit or an unresolved emotional attachment, strikes a deep, primal chord within us. The supernatural world is a place where the rules of life and death no longer apply, where the past can return to confront us, and where the boundary between the living and the dead is often blurred. The question we must ask ourselves is why these stories continue to captivate our imaginations. Why do we return to the tales of the Titanic, of the Tower of London, of the Bell Witch, over and over again? Perhaps it is because they remind us of the fragility of life and the inevitability of death. They speak to our fear of the unknown, our desire for closure, and our need to understand what happens after we leave this world behind. But they also offer something more profound. These stories invite us to reflect on our own lives, our own fears, and the consequences of our actions. They ask us to consider what we leave behind, the impact we have on the world and the people around us, and whether we are leaving behind echoes of our own fears, regrets, and unresolved emotions. As we move forward, the tales we have explored will continue to echo in our minds, lingering in the back of our consciousness like the ghosts of the past. We may never fully understand the mysteries of the supernatural or the true nature of the afterlife, but we can take comfort in the fact that, perhaps, these lost souls are not as lost as they seem. They are simply waiting for us to hear their stories, to acknowledge their pain and offer them the peace they so desperately seek. The curse of the pharaohs, often referred to as the mummy's curse, is one of the most compelling supernatural legends in history. It gained widespread attention following the discovery of the tomb of Egypt's most famous young ruler, King Tutankhamun, in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. But the curse's origins reach back centuries, intertwined with ancient Egyptian belief systems and their reverence for the afterlife. Egyptians believed in an eternal life after death, a journey that required protection from those who would desecrate sacred tombs. The ancient texts, particularly the pyramid texts and later the coffin texts, warned of dire consequences for anyone who violated the sanctity of the tombs. Such beliefs were deeply ingrained in Egyptian culture, and the idea of a curse was not merely superstition but a spiritual warning. The dead should be left in peace, for they held power that could affect the living. When Carter and his team entered King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, they made one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the century. King Tutankhamun's tomb had been untouched for over 3,000 years, and it contained incredible treasures, golden masks, intricate jewelry, and priceless artifacts that would illuminate the wealth and power of ancient Egypt. However, this excitement was soon marred by a series of tragic events that many believed were connected to the tomb's curse. The first victim, Lord Carnarvon, the British nobleman who financed the excavation, died unexpectedly in 1923. He succumbed to an infected mosquito bite just months after the tomb's opening. His death was shocking in its timing, and newspapers quickly connected his demise to the curse. The story became more ominous when his beloved dog, a terrier named Jack, also died mysteriously at the same time, adding a bizarre and eerie element to the tale. As the years passed, a series of other deaths followed. Sir Bruce Ingram, a prominent journalist who had visited the tomb, lost his house in a devastating fire. The archaeologist George Gould, who had been part of the excavation team, died from a sudden illness soon after his visit to the tomb. These incidents, along with the untimely deaths of others associated with the tomb, led to widespread belief that the curse was real. Even those who had simply admired the tomb from afar were not immune. Several members of the press and public who reported on the discovery also met unfortunate ends. The media frenzy surrounding the curse turned the tomb into a symbol of fear and fascination, forever linking King Tut's final resting place to a supernatural force that seemed to punish those who dared to disturb the pharaoh's eternal slumber. However, skepticism abounds. Many historians and scientists suggest that the deaths were mere coincidences or the result of natural causes. They argue that the curse was a construct of the media, designed to capitalize on the tragedy and mystery of the tomb. In fact, many of those who were involved in the excavation, including Howard Carter himself, lived for years after the discovery. Carter, for instance, died in 1939 at the age of 64, far older than the average lifespan of men of his time. Despite the doubts, the story of the curse of the pharaohs endures. The idea that an ancient Egyptian ruler's wrath could extend beyond the grave continues to haunt our collective imagination. Whether or not the curse is real, it reflects our primal fears, our fear of death, of things we cannot understand, and of powers beyond our control. It reminds us that some places, some objects, and some histories are better left undisturbed. The curse is not just a warning against greed or curiosity, it's a symbol of our collective reverence for the dead, for the rituals that bind us to the past, and for the mysterious forces that may exist beyond our comprehension.